G'day, Dave here, and I want to ask you the question, are you happy? Now, it's an interesting question at the moment, isn't it? Because so much of life seems to be falling apart around us. So many things in which we're used to finding pleasure we can't do, we don't have access to them. So many relationships that have brought us happiness, we're cut off and isolated, and we don't get the touch, we don't get the proximity, we can't do the visiting, we can't do the things together that we're used to doing. And maybe happiness is something that just seems to have disappeared. And I know that at the moment there are many people who are just finding it really hard. Well, I think it's a helpful thing at this time for us to wonder and to ask the question whether happiness is actually able to deliver all that was promised. It's something that I've heard a number of times, maybe you've heard it as well. Sometimes when people are reflecting on a decision that you've made, and they might say, well, I wouldn't do that, but if it makes you happy. Or someone will say, well, so long as you're happy, that's the important thing. As though the aspiration in life, the thing that we really should seek after is happiness. Well, we've been looking at Ecclesiastes, and Ecclesiastes has wisdom, it has insight into what life's all about. And the writer of Ecclesiastes embarks on a project, and he's going to see whether there is an end to the quest for happiness that will give him what he wants. He's going to see whether or not life is really all about the pursuit of happiness. And I think it's a good question to ask. It's an important question to be looking at now. And I'm going to pick up Ecclesiastes and open it at chapter 2. I'm going to read to you a few verses. I said to myself, come now, I will test with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself, and I planted vineyards, and I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and in all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing that my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labour, and this was the reward for all of my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was, meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. So the writer of Ecclesiastes embarks on a research project to work out if happiness is the answer to the meaning of life. And you'll notice in verse 3, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. And in verse 9, in all this my wisdom stayed with me. It is a research project. He's not letting go of his faculties. He's not just all in and losing control. No, he's actually exploring whether pleasure will give him what he's looking for. And he's got all the resources to do that. Here is a person who has incredible wealth, is able to do kind of bogan things by drinking and carrying on. He's able to do kind of bourgeois things like amassing a great garden and a vineyard and houses and a harem and all of this sort of stuff. He has nothing stopping him basically finding out whether pleasure is what life's all about. And here is somebody with great insight, I think, for us, particularly us as Aussies. And I speak as one who experiences the fact that I think so many Aussies are actually living for pleasure. We live for the weekend, we live for holidays, we have an insatiable desire to be entertained. We're always seeking to occupy the children and make sure that they're entertained, that they're happy. We invest in all kinds of things: TVs, computers, computer games, phones, tablets, experiences, holidays, trips, adrenaline stuff, drugs, alcohol, fantasy, porn. Our world is driven by entertainment, and we have this insatiable desire to be entertained, to find pleasure, to find happiness. And really, I think what Solomon does in Ecclesiastes is a very glamorous version of the great Australian dream. He wants to be happy, secure, to acquire things for himself. He wants to rise through the ranks. He wants to have influence over people. And in many ways, he's the kind of upper middle class, aspiring Aussie. Surely we'll be happier if we pay off our homes. Surely we'll be happier if we have that overseas holiday. That's certainly not a cruise at the moment. Certainly we'll be happier if we upscale our TV. We'll be happier if we get a faster and a better computer. We'll only be happy if we get the latest Samsung or the latest iPhone. You see, we think that the accumulation of things and the accumulation of experiences and the accumulation of relationships will give us happiness, and that will make our lives fulfilling. But it doesn't, does it? What it does is leave us in a constant state of dissatisfaction. And the advertising industry know that. And they feed off it all the time. Clive Hamilton, who's written a number of books and is a popular writer in Australia, wrote a book called The Growth Fetish. And in that book, he identified some really interesting things. You know, in the mid-1950s, the average house size in Australia was 115 square metres. Now, these days, it's over double that, and we have less people in the average family size. Here's a curious one. In the mid-1980s, a barbecue took something like 50 bricks and a hot plate. Now you can spend up to 30 grand or more for the latest high-tech, computer-controlled, Bluetooth, gas-powered outdoor kitchen. And what would Ecclesiastes teach us? It's a chasing after the wind. For at the end of the day, it's not how much you have. It's not the abundance of your possessions or your experiences. No, true happiness is not found by seeking happiness. But if you seek after God, you may just discover what genuine happiness is all about.